Where Winds Meet is a game that I've been eyeing for a while now. When I found out it was a free-to-play open-world video game set in ancient China, it felt like a no-brainer. The best way I can describe this game is like if Black Myth Wukong had a baby with Assassin's Creed, and Assassin's Creed had a baby with Genshin Impact. And as someone that loves all three of those games, it was a no-brainer. After spending a ton of time with the game, which I haven't even finished by the way, I realized it's doing something completely different. So in this video, I'll be breaking down my honest thoughts after spending a ton of time with Where Winds Meet. Huge thanks to the team behind the game for sponsoring this video. I was planning to cover it regardless, so finding out they wanted to collaborate just made it the perfect timing. Now do know all opinions in this video are purely my own. I was not paid to say anything specific. So with all that out the way, let's jump right into it. Let's start with the story so you know what you're getting yourself into. Now there won't be any spoilers so you're safe here. Where Winds Meet frames its story like a wandering hero tale in 10th century China during the whole 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms. Now, as for the main character, you basically play as a young swordsmaster with a burned hometown and missing parents. I'll be honest, it's a very interesting concept for a story because it dives into so much deep cultural stuff that I really wasn't familiar with. So the likes of warlords and the code of the martial world. It's quite ambitious. Culturally, the game leans into something known as a wuxia experience, which if you aren't aware, wuxia is basically a genre of Chinese fiction. And in Where Winds Meet, the game basically blends traditional Chinese martial arts with fantasy, featuring, all sorts of crazy superhuman abilities, that whole philosophical depth with the narrative, and it's just a very aesthetically pleasing type of genre. One of the most fun aspects when you first play Where Winds Meet is your character, and what's cool is that this game has a character creator element, so you are not just playing as a predetermined character. You can choose between male and female, and just by how many options there are in this character customization, they went quite deep with it, because even past all of this, your main character is fully voice acted and has actual cutscenes with animated facial expressions and so on. So the good thing is, you're not really playing a soulless puppet, if you know what I mean, and kudos to the developers for that. You can change literally anything. So, eyebrows, jaw structure, chin length, nose bridge, stuff like that, and it's very detailed. You can even customize your appearance later in game with a ton of outfits, hats and so on, but those are just visual cosmetics and don't affect gameplay whatsoever. Now, I played a lot of this game, and I kid you not, it feels like I've barely scratched the surface, but so far it's quite enjoyable. For example, a lot of the side characters you'll meet in the main story instantly, and I'm not just saying this for the sake of it, but you will instantly connect with them in an emotional way. Their designs are quite detailed too, and if I recall, I remember reading that this game has so many unique characters. There's even full voice acting in English, which surprised me because this is a Chinese game, and since it comes with a full English voiceover, I expected it to be a bit bad, but it sounded super high quality with great voice actors. I will say though, my one criticism with the aspect is lip sync, since it is originally in Chinese, so it's hard to, connect with the movement of their mouth to the voice. But I feel like that's common in translated games. Apart from side characters, you'll also encounter, some great villains, some great combat too, which I'll get into later. But as for combat real quick, it has this Souls-like style of combat, and I like it. But you can change the difficulty if you find it too hard, and have it play more like a traditional, action RPG type of game. But yeah, let's move on from the story and characters because I don't want to end up spoiling anything. But just know, so far, it's been pretty good. Now here's where the game shines, and that is in its open world. Now when I think of an open world that allows you to be free and do wherever you want and go anywhere you want, I think of the likes of Skyrim. I think of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, No Man's Sky for example. And Where Winds Meet is one of those open worlds because I kid you not, it is so insanely detailed to the point where I would often walk through towns or forests with immersive mode turned on, which is basically a mode that gets rid of the UI. I kind of got Assassin's Creed Odyssey vibes a bit with how vibrant everything is. For a very ambitious open world like this, I honestly expected loading screens, but nope. This game has no loading screens upon entering towns or cities, and look at this view of the city right there. You can go there whenever you want, and again there are no loading screens or restrictions, which is baffling for this scope of world. This game essentially has 2 main areas on the map, and both feel super unique to each other. There's a main city in one side of the map, and a more open land and mountainous region in the other. There's literally thousands of points of interest. There's over 20 regions in the game, and even all the caves and dungeons are handcrafted and very well detailed. And then when it comes to the traversal side of things, this is where it gets interesting, because you know how a typical open world game just has a horse? Well, this game decides that you can literally fly around, and in multiple different ways too. For example, this one on screen is named Meteor Sky Dash, and it's as the name suggests, you're just dashing through the sky without any lag or hiccups happening. It's all seamless, which is quite surprising to be fair. But going back to this city I was talking about, you know, a crazy thing about this city is that every single building in this entire city can be entered. There's no fake doors or closed off entrances blocking you from entering. You can literally enter any of the buildings, and these buildings in the city are faithfully recreated from actual real ancient Chinese architecture. You know, I often imagine that a city this size is not possible in a video game, but here it is. This is genuinely the size of Gutenberg from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, but double in size, if not more, and I find that to be very impressive. Surprisingly, my FPS wasn't dropping much in the city, but that could be because I have a super high-end PC, but it did feel smooth. In the open world I was getting around 90 to 100 FPS, but when I was in this massive city, it would drop to about 70, but that's still super impressive. I also want to touch on the NPCs in this game. They all have unique routines, and they are not static models just there for vibes. You can walk into them and it affects their routine. There's even a whole realism system. Now what I mean by that is there's crime. So for example, you can bump into these NPCs until they get agitated and start fighting back, or perhaps even run away. You can swing at them and they defend themselves, and hey, you can even GTA your way by stealing horses from people, which is kind of amusing. They get pissed off and start fighting back too. You can even steal items from NPCs using a certain perk that you will unlock by discovering a side quest. It goes quite in depth. Oh, and that reminds me, the realism system applies to you as well. So for example, if you take fall damage or get hit, you can injure yourself. And this isn't a case of, you know, the game auto healing you. No, you literally have injuries, meaning you need to go get those injuries checked out by a doctor. Otherwise, you'd be playing the game with a sprained ankle and whatnot. That's the type of realism this game has when it comes to NPCs and day-to-day life. The weather system is pretty good too. It's not one of those weather systems where nothing happens until you let's say sleep or change the time of day. You can see the actual weather change. So it could rain, then it'll be misty, then foggy, then it would clear up and be sunny. It's a full cycle of realistic weather. And again, it all affects the NPC's routines. Now, the last thing I want to touch on regarding the open world is the way you can grow as a character. So, as you explore the world, you will constantly find new ways to grow stronger. You can learn martial arts techniques by observing the world around you, studying how animals move, or analyzing how your enemies fight. Every single encounter basically becomes a chance to pick up new skills and refine your combat style. For example, in this scenario on screen, I wanted to unlock a new weapon, and to do so, I had to study this character's movement who had the weapon and press the right prompts at the correct time. And then boom, I unlocked a brand new weapon. Each unlockable weapon has something interesting tied to it, so you are not just unlocking new weapons for the sake of it. Apart from the beautiful open world itself and the realism with NPCs and whatnot, the game thrives on content, and a free game like this needs to be updated on a regular basis, and with that comes a shared load of content. This could be, of course, the main story, side quests, random encounters, world bosses, mini games. There's so many more, you name it. As somebody who's played Genshin Impact since launch, I could immediately tell that this game takes some inspiration from it, and that familiarity made it easy for me to settle in and enjoy what this game offers. Let's start with side quests. There's a ton of them, and they range in all shapes and sizes. Some are part of multi-volume side stories, each with its own plot, rewards, puzzles, or even boss fights. You'll also meet some great characters along the way. One quest had me fighting a bear where I literally had to throw the bear into rocks to win. Another told me a kind of tragic tale about a lunar goddess. There's a lot of creativity here. You even have world bosses roaming the map. For example, I stumbled upon this big guy who it turns out was a world boss, and he was too high of a level for me. And the thing is, these bosses don't really feel like generic enemies. They have such unique animations and even second phases to them. There's plenty as well. Again, going back earlier, it's a Souls-like combat, so the bosses must be designed well, otherwise it will falter on that aspect. The arenas these bosses are in are super unique too, and I think I've maybe encountered around 10 bosses, which isn't that much, and I know that there are plenty more out there. There's even a system where you can replay boss fights for better rewards or even summon allies for help. You'll also come across mini games while exploring. For example, you'll stumble upon a cat that triggers mini challenges like chasing objects or solving puzzles. They're short and fun, and the rewards make them worth doing. Sometimes NPCs will challenge you to duels, and one even made me use my bow against sheep to win. There's a card game that you can sink a lot of time into, and there is so much more that I have barely scratched the surface of talking about it in this video. Even the random encounters are well done. At one point, I caught a pickpocket and had to follow him before turning him into the constable for a reward. I didn't find that quest in a journal, it just happened naturally while I was exploring, which makes this world feel more alive. There's co-op and online too, so you're not just playing with yourself. But I've always been a solo player with these types of games, so I didn't really touch the online side of things, but based on the very limited time that I did, it was pretty good. And it reminds me, since this is a free game, you may be thinking, well, how could they possibly make money to keep the servers up and running? And that's where microtransactions come in. Now, usually I am very negative towards microtransactions, but there is only 2 instances where microtransaction fits in a video game, and one of them is a free-to-play game such as this. Now, what I like about the approach that this game takes with its microtransactions is that it is not pay to win whatsoever. In fact, the only paid content that this game offers is cosmetics and a battle pass. They say it themselves, they strictly adhere to a non-pay to win principle. And I respect that because they could have very easily locked literal content and progression behind a paywall, and they didn't. In fact, what's even more impressive is that they have said all future game content such as DLC will be released completely free for everybody. I really respect that. They could have gone the typical AAA route, or rather Ubisoft route, where they would charge $70 for a full game, and then in that game they would sell overpriced cosmetic packs to gullible victims that affect the gameplay. But they didn't. Where Winds Meet does it the fair way, and that alone deserves some credit. Now, I want to talk about the gameplay, because this is a wuxia inspired game, and that also means its gameplay is a massive focal point. For example, the combat. This is one of the most in-depth combat systems I've seen in a while. It's again built around that wuxia fantasy, where every single fight you take literally feels like a scene from a martial arts movie. The combat is super fluid and fast, and once you get the hang of it, you will find out how satisfying it is to chain moves together. Now, at its core, the system plays like an action RPG with clear Souls-like influence. You've got light and heavy attacks, you've got blocks and dodges and parrying, but the most important thing is timing. Some attacks can be deflected, others are signaled in gold, meaning you dodge or basically die. I think if you're a player that spams buttons, you will struggle, as this game is most definitely not built for spamming attacks. It's more like you need to read your opponent and then attack when the correct movement presents itself, especially with the boss fights. It's like Black Myth Wukong kind of. You can equip 2 weapons at once and swap mid-combo, which opens up a lot of creative ways to fight. You know, for example, maybe you start with dual blades, which is probably my favorite weapon, then you can switch to a long spear for those more heavy reach attacks. And this all can happen in the same combo. Even with a bow, you can pull out a bow mid-combo too. There's some incredible combat focused YouTubers out there that I know will love this. For example, a YouTuber named Gamebreaker God will absolutely adore this. This combat system is in his realm. Now, what's cool is that there are so many weapon types. In fact, there are 7. So you got a sword, a dual sword, a spear, glaive, a fan, an umbrella, which is quite interesting, and then the bow. And they all feel different from each other. The game also has something called mystical arts. And these mystical arts are supernatural abilities that can change both combat and exploration. For example, there's a mystical art that you can obtain which allows you to literally slow down time. There's one that allows you to teleport across the battlefield. There's one that allows you to freeze water to walk over it, or even use Tai Chi to grab and toss enemies through the air. And these don't just apply to combat, because you can literally use them while exploring the world. For example, remember earlier in the video when I talked about how you can steal items? That's part of it. There's also a stealth system which I like because, as you may or may not know, I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and any game that has a stealth system, I'm instantly hooked. And this one feels quite smooth, so you can basically go full assassin mode, such as hiding in tall grass, assassinating from behind, and you can even chain these super cool stealth combos. Of course you can, if you want, just go full combat mode and start cutting through everybody, but that's the beauty of freedom in this game. You can play however you want. All of it together makes the gameplay feel quite deep, and not really just another hack and slash, but to me it feels like a system that rewards creativity. So after spending this much time in Where Winds Meet, I can safely say it's one of the most ambitious free-to-play RPGs I've seen in a while. What surprised me the most is just how much content you get for something that doesn't cost a dime. The world feels massive and detailed, all the systems are super deep, and hey, even the story I thought has way more heart than I expected. There is so much more that I haven't even discussed in this video, like more about the multiplayer, like sex, like factions. And the simple reason is I'm overwhelmed. There is so much to do, and I'm very interested to see where it goes from here. You can tell the developers really cared about creating something that represents Chinese history and culture while still making it accessible to a global audience. Visually, the game looks stunning. The combat feels polished, the exploration is rewarding, and all the side activities actually add to the world instead of distracting from it. Now sure, there are a few rough edges here and there which I do think will be improved over time. For example, the lip sync during English dialogue is not perfect whatsoever, and sometimes the user interface can feel a bit cluttered, but none of that ruins the experience. I would recommend them to add certain elements to the settings that we can toggle on or off during immersive mode. So yeah, with regular updates, this could very easily grow into one of the most interesting open world RPGs to come out of China in years. Once again, special thanks to the team behind Where Winds Meet for sponsoring this video, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.